Every transformation begins with a single spark of courage. It does not start with perfect plans, endless resources, or guarantees of success. It starts with the heart's quiet whisper that says, "I must move forward." Courage is not a grand shout that silences fear. It is the calm voice that persists in spite of it. Every man and woman who has ever risen from failure, poverty, or despair began their journey not with certainty, but with courage. The decision to try. The first wall you will meet on the path of change is fear. Fear of judgment, fear of loss, fear of failure. It guards the gates of transformation like a sentinel. And yet, that fear is not your enemy. It exists to test the depth of your desire. It asks you, do you truly wish to change? Those who retreat at the sight of fear remain trapped within their old selves. But those who face it, trembling yet unyielding, discover that courage is stronger than any doubt. Transformation belongs only to those who have learned to take the first step while afraid. There comes a moment in every life when one must choose between comfort and courage. Comfort keeps you safe, but it also keeps you small. It whispers, "Stay where you are, it's familiar here." But courage challenges that whisper and says, "There is more to you than this." The moment you act in defiance of your comfort, you ignite transformation. No one ever found greatness by standing still. The soul grows only when it is stretched beyond what it once thought possible. Action is the bridge between courage and transformation. Many dream, many wish, and many plan, but only the courageous act. And it is in that action that change begins to breathe. The smallest courageous step has more power than the grandest intention left unfulfilled. Every act of courage multiplies itself. The more you move forward, the less fear has control. Courage feeds on momentum, and momentum shapes destiny. To act, even in uncertainty, is to announce to the world that you are ready to become more than you have been. Failure will come, as it always does to the brave, but courage transforms failure into a teacher. The timid see failure as an ending, the courageous see it as a lesson. Each mistake sharpens wisdom, each setback strengthens resolve. True transformation does not come from success alone. It comes from the perseverance to rise each time you fall. Every scar carved by failure is proof that courage was stronger than defeat. The furnace of transformation is heated by trial, and courage is the fire that keeps you walking through it. The world remembers not those who avoided risk, but those who dared to defy it. Courage is contagious. When one person rises, others find the strength to do the same. Your transformation becomes a signal to the discouraged, a reminder that bravery births change. To live with courage is to become a beacon for those still bound by fear. The greatest contribution one can make is not in words, but in the example of a life transformed by boldness. Understand this truth. Without courage, no dream can take root. Without courage, no faith can grow. Without courage, no transformation can begin. The first step may not be grand, but it is sacred. It is the step that says, "I will not let fear define me." Once that decision is made, life begins to unfold in ways you could never imagine. For courage is not just the first step to transformation. It is the force that carries you through every step thereafter. And when you look back, you will see that everything began the moment you chose to be brave. Courage is the seed from which all transformation grows. It is the hidden force that moves a person from thought into action, from desire into destiny. Every meaningful change begins with a moment of boldness, the decision to step beyond what is familiar. It is easy to wish for growth, to dream of a better life, or to speak of transformation. But none of these hold value until courage gives them motion. The individual who seeks to transform must first confront the invisible wall of hesitation that stands between knowing what must be done and doing it. This wall is built from doubts, fears, and old habits, yet it begins to crumble the very moment one dares to act. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the command of it. It is the recognition that growth cannot exist where safety rules the heart. At the beginning of any transformation, the mind resists change. It clings to the known because the known feels secure, even if it causes pain or limitation. The human spirit, however, was never designed to remain stagnant. There is a quiet restlessness in every soul that hungers for more, a call to evolve, to rise beyond mediocrity, to discover purpose. Courage answers that call. It is the voice within that says, "I must begin," even when the path ahead is uncertain. Without that initial burst of bravery, no transformation can take root. A person may possess great intelligence, resources, and opportunity, but if they lack the courage to act, they remain confined to the same place in life. The seed of potential withers without the water of courage. Courage is the foundation upon which faith, perseverance, and success are built. Before one can believe deeply, one must first have the courage to question, to explore, and to take the first step into the unknown. It is courage that opens the door for faith to walk through. When a person dares to move forward despite fear, life begins to respond. Doors appear where walls once stood, opportunities rise from what once seemed impossible, and strength reveals itself in moments of vulnerability. This is the paradox of courage. It seems like weakness in the beginning, but it reveals unimaginable power once expressed. The decision to be brave transforms thought into motion and possibility into reality. True courage often begins in silence. It does not announce itself with fanfare or confidence. It stirs quietly in the heart long before it is seen in action. It may appear as a trembling decision, a whispered prayer, or a single hesitant step. But it is in those moments that transformation begins. The greatest changes in life rarely begin with loud declarations. They begin when a person dares to believe that their life can be different. That belief is born of courage. It is the act of saying yes to the unknown and no to the chains of familiarity. Every story of greatness began with someone who was willing to begin before they felt ready. Courage is the permission we give ourselves to try. When courage becomes a habit, transformation becomes inevitable. Each act of bravery strengthens the will, and each challenge faced with courage builds character. Just as a muscle grows through resistance, the soul expands through courageous action. The first act of courage makes the next one easier, and over time, what once felt impossible becomes natural. Courage teaches that fear loses its power when confronted. It shows that every obstacle holds a lesson, and every risk carries a reward. Those who consistently act with courage begin to shape their own reality. They discover that life bends to the will of those who dare to move forward despite uncertainty. Courage also awakens self-respect. When an individual takes the first step toward transformation, they begin to see themselves as capable, worthy, and powerful. That self-perception changes everything. The moment one acts bravely, even in small ways, the mind begins to trust itself. This trust becomes the foundation for confidence, and confidence fuels further transformation. Courage, therefore, is not only the first step toward change, it is the force that transforms identity. The timid become strong, the doubtful become decisive, and the hesitant become determined. Every courageous choice redefines who a person believes they are, and with each new act of bravery, the distance between who they are and who they wish to become grows smaller. The seed of courage, once planted, demands nurturing. It must be fed with action, watered with faith, and protected from the weeds of doubt. Those who nurture it find themselves transformed not only in what they do, but in how they think and live. They begin to understand that courage is not a single act but a way of being, a continual choice to rise, to move, and to trust. When courage takes root in the heart, transformation becomes a natural outcome. It changes how one sees obstacles, interprets pain, and embraces the journey of growth. It reminds every soul that the power to change was never outside of them. It was always waiting, quietly, in the courage to begin. Fear stands as the first and most persistent barrier to transformation. It greets every dreamer the moment they decide to change, whispering doubts that seem to echo from every corner of the mind. Fear says, "You are not ready," "You will fail," or "You are not good enough." It disguises itself as logic, caution, or even humility. But in truth, it is the silent warden that keeps countless people imprisoned within their comfort zones. Yet fear, when understood correctly, is not an enemy. It is a messenger. It signals that you are standing at the edge of growth, that you are about to enter a realm where the old version of you can no longer survive. To transform, one must first face this guardian, for courage is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. Fear will always be present when you are walking towards something meaningful. Its very presence is proof that you are on the path of change. When a person stands before fear, they are confronted with a choice: retreat into the familiar or move forward into the unknown. The timid mind seeks safety, but the courageous spirit seeks truth. Those who yield to fear choose stagnation, and those who confront it unlock their transformation. Fear, by nature, feeds on inaction. It grows stronger when we avoid it and weaker when we face it. The moment one decides to step through fear, it begins to dissolve. Fear thrives on imagination. It projects worst-case scenarios that rarely materialize. But once you move forward, reality often proves far kinder than the mind's illusions. The act of facing fear exposes it for what it truly is, a shadow cast by your own potential. Every transformation requires a person to confront the discomfort of uncertainty. The mind craves control, and fear arises whenever control is threatened. But no meaningful transformation can occur in a life built entirely on certainty. Growth requires risk, the risk of failure, rejection, loss, or change. To transform is to release the old identity and step into one not yet defined, and fear resists this surrender. It clings to what is known, even if that known is painful. But courage speaks louder. It says, "Though I do not know what awaits, I will trust that growth is greater than comfort." This trust marks the turning point in every journey of transformation. When you act despite fear, you prove to yourself that fear has no power over you. That proof becomes the foundation of confidence, and confidence feeds transformation. Fear's greatest illusion is permanence. It convinces the mind that its grip will never loosen, that the anxiety and doubt it brings will last forever. Yet the truth is that fear is fleeting. It is strongest before action and weakest after it. Before you leap, fear screams its loudest. After you leap, silence follows. The mind realizes that survival was never the issue, growth was. Every time you confront fear and move forward, you reshape your inner world. You teach your subconscious that it is safe to expand, that fear is not a signal to stop but a sign to proceed with awareness. Over time, this rewiring of thought transforms fear from a paralyzing force into a guidepost that points toward your next breakthrough. Those who achieve transformation understand that fear and opportunity often appear together. The same door that opens to your next level of life is guarded by the feeling of fear. Most turn back at this point, mistaking the guardian for the enemy, but the courageous see it differently. They know that beyond that fear lies freedom. Fear, then, becomes the test of readiness. It asks, how much do you truly desire this change? The stronger the fear, the greater the transformation that follows. The universe does not test the weak. It tests the willing, and those who walk through fear discover not only new outcomes, but a new sense of self. They realize that the person they feared they could not be has been waiting within them all along. In truth, fear can become an ally. It sharpens awareness, awakens focus, and forces introspection. When faced properly, it teaches discernment and humility. It reminds you that you are human, that growth requires vulnerability, but it also reveals that within vulnerability lies the seed of immense strength. The man or woman who embraces fear and continues forward learns that courage is not about never trembling. It is about trembling and acting anyway. This paradox defines all transformation. Fear initiates the challenge, courage completes it. Without fear, there would be no need for bravery, no opportunity for the soul to expand. Transformation, then, is a dance between fear and courage. One invites the other, and both are essential to growth. Fear reveals the limits of the old self, while courage introduces the possibility of the new. The one who learns to walk with fear as a companion rather than an enemy evolves faster, deeper, and with greater wisdom. Fear no longer becomes a signal to stop, but a reminder that you are alive, growing, and awakening to your potential. Every step taken through fear becomes a declaration that you are stronger than your limitations. And with each act of courage, the voice of fear fades until it becomes only a faint echo behind you, replaced by the sound of transformation unfolding. There comes a defining moment in every life when an individual stands at a crossroads between comfort and courage. It is not a loud or dramatic moment, but a quiet turning point within the soul where one must decide whether to remain as they are or to become something more. This moment often arrives disguised as discomfort, dissatisfaction, or a longing that refuses to be silenced. It whispers that there is more to life than what is currently known, yet the fear of change tries to drown that whisper out. The person who chooses courage at that crossroads steps onto the path of transformation, while the one who clings to comfort remains bound to repetition. Every breakthrough, every reinvention of the self begins when one realizes that the pain of staying the same has become heavier than the fear of stepping forward. Comfort has a way of deceiving the mind into believing it is safety. It offers predictability, familiarity, and the illusion of control. But comfort is a quiet captor. It lulls the soul into sleep. It promises peace but delivers stagnation. When one stays too long within the borders of comfort, growth slows, dreams fade, and life begins to feel smaller. The spirit, however, was created for expansion. Deep within, every individual knows they are meant for more, and that knowing creates restlessness. This restlessness is not a curse. It is a divine nudge urging movement. The discomfort one feels in a stagnant life is not a sign of failure. It is the birth cry of transformation demanding attention. To ignore it is to silence the very force that leads to fulfillment. Courage, on the other hand, asks for sacrifice. It demands the willingness to let go of certainty in exchange for possibility. To choose courage is to step into a world where the outcome cannot be guaranteed, yet the potential for greatness is limitless. It means facing the unknown with open hands, trusting that what lies ahead is worth more than what must be left behind. Many stand at this threshold and hesitate, looking back at the comfort they have built, weighing the security of the familiar against the promise of the new. Transformation begins the moment they stop looking backward. Once the decision is made to move forward, the universe seems to rearrange itself in favor of that choice. Opportunities begin to appear. Strength begins to awaken, and paths once hidden start to unfold. But none of this is revealed until after the choice to be courageous is made. The moment of decision is rarely convenient. It often comes when life feels uncertain or when circumstances seem unfavorable. Yet this is precisely when courage matters most. It is easy to act when the path is clear, but transformation is born in moments of darkness when clarity has not yet come. The brave do not wait for certainty. They create it through action. They understand that clarity follows commitment, not the other way around. Once a person decides to take the leap, even without full understanding, a new energy begins to flow. This decision marks the separation between those who dream and those who do. Transformation rewards movement, not hesitation. The very act of deciding sends a signal to the subconscious mind that change is not only desired but inevitable. At the heart of every courageous decision lies faith. Faith in one's purpose, faith in the process, and faith that growth will justify the struggle. The transformation process is never immediate. It requires endurance and patience. But the seed of transformation is planted in that single courageous choice. From that point forward, every challenge encountered becomes part of the evolution. The individual who once doubted their strength begins to discover it. Each test refines resilience, each obstacle strengthens conviction. The decision that once felt uncertain begins to reveal its wisdom in hindsight. One looks back and realizes that courage was not reckless, it was necessary. Every achievement, every triumph, every moment of self-discovery can be traced back to that instant when courage won over comfort. Courage at the moment of decision also redefines identity. It creates a mental shift from being a passive observer of life to an active creator of destiny. Those who choose courage begin to see themselves differently. They no longer wait for external permission to act or for perfect timing to arrive. They begin to trust their inner voice and recognize that growth is their responsibility. This internal shift changes the trajectory of life. New choices lead to new experiences lead to new perspectives, and new perspectives create a new version of self. The individual who once hesitated now leads with intention, understanding that courage is not a one-time act but a continual choice that fuels every transformation thereafter. In truth, transformation does not demand perfection. It demands decision. It begins not when everything is ready, but when a person declares, "I will no longer live in fear." The moment of decision is a sacred act of self-ownership, a declaration that one's life will no longer be governed by circumstance, but by choice. The courage to decide marks the birth of a new life. It is the bridge that connects who you are to who you are becoming. And though the path ahead may be uncertain, the act of stepping forward ensures that it will not be empty. For in that single decision to choose courage over comfort, a person aligns themselves with their true potential, and transformation begins its quiet, unstoppable work within them. Courage without action is like fire without heat. It holds the potential for transformation, but produces no change until it is expressed. Action is the vessel through which courage becomes power, and power is the proof of transformation. Many possess courage in thought, but not in deed. They imagine, they plan, they prepare, yet they never move. The moment courage meets action, life begins to shift. Every great achievement, every reinvention of the self begins not with grand intention, but with a single step taken despite fear. Action gives courage form. It translates the invisible strength of the heart into tangible progress. The individual who dares to act, even imperfectly, begins to shape reality according to will. Without action, courage remains dormant. With action, it becomes unstoppable momentum. The difference between the dreamer and the doer lies in this. The dreamer waits for perfect conditions, while the doer moves forward despite imperfection. Action does not require certainty. It requires decision. The courageous understand that hesitation is the enemy of growth. The longer one waits for clarity, the dimmer the vision becomes. Clarity is born through motion. The first step, no matter how small, awakens dormant energy within the spirit and signals to life that transformation has begun. Each step that follows builds confidence, and confidence feeds more courage. This is how transformation gains strength, not through the magnitude of one act, but through the consistency of many. Small acts of courage, repeated daily, accumulate into profound change. Fear often disguises itself as the need for more preparation. It convinces the mind that one must first have complete knowledge, perfect timing, or total confidence before taking action. But transformation requires none of these. What it demands is movement. Action exposes what must be learned and reveals strength that cannot be discovered through thought alone. The act of doing transforms fear into feedback and uncertainty into understanding. Those who act find that life begins to cooperate with their courage. Doors that once appeared locked begin to open, not because the world changed, but because they did. Momentum creates opportunity, and opportunity fuels transformation. When courage takes physical form through action, it alters both the inner and outer worlds. Internally, it reprograms the mind to believe in its own power. Each time one acts bravely, the subconscious registers a new pattern. I can do this. That belief begins to override doubt. Externally, action sends ripples through the environment, attracting people, resources, and circumstances aligned with the direction of movement. Life responds to energy in motion. It rewards boldness and punishes hesitation. Those who act in courage do not wait for permission. They create conditions for success through persistence. The act itself becomes a declaration that transformation is no longer a wish, it is a commitment. Action also transforms courage into wisdom. Every act, whether it results in success or failure, adds experience to the soul. Failure, in particular, refines courage by teaching discernment. A person who acts courageously and stumbles learns far more than one who hides behind inaction. Mistakes become mirrors reflecting what must be strengthened, adjusted, or released. Through this process, courage evolves from raw emotion into refined mastery. The individual learns that setbacks are not signs to stop, but signals to grow. Each failure faced with courage adds another layer of resilience. And resilience is the true mark of transformation. Those who act bravely, even when results are uncertain, develop an inner stability that no external loss can shake. The act of courage also has a magnetic effect. It inspires others to rise. When one person steps forward boldly, they become a living example of what is possible. Their movement awakens something dormant in others, showing that fear can be overcome and that change is within reach. Courageous action is contagious. It multiplies through example. Transformation, therefore, is never limited to the individual. It extends outward, shaping families, communities, and even generations. A single act of courage has the power to shift entire environments because it challenges the silent conformity of fear that holds others back. Action guided by courage is not reckless, it is intentional. It does not ignore risk, but moves forward with awareness that risk is part of growth. Those who live courageously do not wait for confidence. They earn it through repeated movement. Each step strengthens faith in the process, and over time, courage becomes instinctive. Action transforms uncertainty into experience and transforms the dream into reality. It bridges the gap between who one is and who one is meant to be. Through consistent, courageous action, the impossible begins to appear attainable, and the extraordinary becomes the natural expression of persistence. In the end, courage that acts becomes the architect of transformation. Every dream that has ever been realized was once a moment of courage translated into motion. Thought alone cannot build, faith alone cannot shape, but courage expressed through action can move mountains. Transformation does not occur in the mind, it happens in motion. It happens when one chooses to move forward despite trembling hands, despite unclear outcomes, despite doubt. It happens when courage ceases to be a feeling and becomes a way of life. The person who acts courageously discovers that power was never something to acquire. It was something to awaken through movement. Every step forward becomes proof that courage, when expressed through action, is the greatest force of transformation a human being can possess. Failure is the furnace in which courage is tested, purified, and strengthened. Every act of bravery eventually meets resistance, and within that resistance lies the opportunity to refine the spirit. Failure is not the enemy of transformation. It is the instrument through which it is perfected. Those who fear failure never grow, for they spend their lives avoiding the very experiences that would make them stronger. Failure strips away illusion and pride. It humbles the mind while awakening the deeper power of perseverance. It teaches that progress is not a straight line, but a process of rise, fall, and rise again. The courageous understand that failure does not end the journey. It clarifies it. Each fall reveals what still must be learned, what still must be improved, and what inner strength has yet to be discovered. Courage without failure remains untested. It is easy to be brave when everything succeeds, but true courage reveals itself in the aftermath of disappointment. Failure exposes the depth of one's resolve. It asks, will you still continue when the applause fades, when your efforts seem wasted, when the results betray your intention? The individual who answers yes to that question is the one who transforms. Each failure endured with courage becomes a stone in the foundation of character. It teaches endurance, patience, and humility, virtues that no comfort or easy success can cultivate. Failure becomes the silent mentor of the courageous, shaping their perspective and teaching them that every setback is merely preparation for a greater victory. The process of failure redefines how one sees success. At first, failure feels like loss, like evidence of inadequacy. But through courage, it becomes revelation. It shows what does not work, so that one may discover what does. It reveals the limits of strategy, but exposes the strength of spirit. Those who dare to fail grow wise. They stop measuring progress by outcomes alone and begin to measure it by growth, discipline, and inner evolution. The courageous see failure as feedback, not finality. They understand that every collapse carries instruction, and that instruction, once absorbed, becomes fuel for transformation. The timid interpret failure as rejection. The brave interpret it as redirection. That single difference in interpretation determines whether one remains broken or becomes unbreakable. Failure also refines identity. It strips away the false image of self built upon achievement and exposes the authentic core that no loss can destroy. Through failure, a person learns who they truly are, beyond status, beyond recognition, beyond external validation. The experience of falling and rising again creates self-knowledge that cannot be taught in comfort. It reveals that strength is not measured by how often one avoids defeat, but by how many times one refuses to stay defeated. This realization marks a turning point in transformation. The individual no longer seeks to avoid pain, but to learn from it. The fire of failure, once feared, becomes welcomed as a necessary part of growth. Through this acceptance, courage deepens into wisdom and maturity. In the furnace of failure, ego is burned away, leaving behind authenticity and humility. Courage born from failure no longer seeks validation from the outside world, because it has found its validation within. Every scar becomes a symbol of endurance, every disappointment a lesson in resilience. Those who rise from failure carry a quiet confidence that cannot be shaken because it was earned through struggle. They have faced loss and survived, therefore, nothing external can define or defeat them. This inner stability is what makes transformation permanent. Success may build confidence, but failure builds character, and it is character that sustains transformation when challenges return. Failure also creates empathy, a vital element of transformation. Those who have fallen understand the pain of others who struggle. Their courage, once personal, becomes a source of inspiration for those still trapped by fear. They speak not from theory but from experience, their words carrying the weight of truth. Failure makes leaders compassionate and mentors wise, because it teaches them that perfection is not the goal. Progress is. Through this understanding, they begin to see that transformation is not about rising once, but about learning to rise every time life demands it. The beauty of failure is that it removes illusions of control. It reminds humanity that growth is not linear, and that mastery is born through repetition, error, and persistence. The courageous do not view failure as punishment, but as refinement. They understand that without it, their courage would remain unsharpened, their conviction untested. Failure forces adaptation. It demands creativity. It pushes the mind to search for new paths, to strengthen vision, to evolve thinking. Every great transformation story is marked by moments of defeat that later became the soil from which greatness grew. What once felt like ruin becomes revelation. What once felt like loss becomes liberation. Ultimately, failure is not the end of courage. It is its proving ground. Every time a person rises after falling, they strengthen their belief in their own endurance. They learn that transformation is not measured by how smoothly one succeeds, but by how persistently one continues. Courage without failure is theory. Courage through failure is mastery. The individual who endures defeat yet continues to walk forward becomes indestructible in spirit. Their transformation is no longer dependent on success. It becomes an expression of resilience, faith, and inner strength. Failure, therefore, is not the enemy of transformation, but its greatest ally, for it purifies courage until nothing remains but truth, determination, and unshakable resolve. The legacy of courage extends far beyond the individual who embodies it. It becomes a living force that shapes the world around them. When one person chooses bravery over fear, they ignite a silent revolution that influences countless others. Transformation born of courage is never private. It radiates outward, inspiring, healing, and awakening others who witness it. The courageous life becomes a message stronger than any words. It tells the world that fear is not the end of possibility, that strength can rise from pain, and that greatness begins with one bold decision. Those who walk the path of courage leave behind more than accomplishments. They leave a pattern for others to follow, a model of what is possible when faith and action unite. The world remembers such individuals not for their perfection, but for their persistence and the light they carried through darkness. When a person transforms through courage, their very presence becomes magnetic. Others are drawn to the energy of authenticity that courage creates. People sense when someone has walked through fire and emerged with strength rather than bitterness. This kind of transformation cannot be faked. It carries a frequency that resonates deeply with the human spirit. It reminds others of their own dormant power, their own capacity to rise. The legacy of the brave is not built on speeches or titles, but on the invisible influence they exert by simply living fearlessly. Courage becomes contagious. It awakens sleeping souls and calls others toward their own transformation. The courageous, therefore, serve as mirrors, reflecting back to others the greatness they have forgotten within themselves. A legacy of courage also reshapes the narrative of failure and fear in society. Where many once saw defeat as shame, the courageous redefine it as strength. They demonstrate that vulnerability is not weakness, that struggle is not defeat, and that uncertainty is not the end. By living openly, by facing difficulty without retreat, they dismantle the myth that strength requires the absence of pain. Their lives teach that courage is not the denial of struggle, but the mastery of it. This redefinition shifts the collective mindset, encouraging others to take risks, to dream and to believe in possibilities beyond their limitations. The brave, through their example, rewrite what it means to live fully. Courageous transformation often becomes the foundation of leadership, not through authority, but through example. The individual who has conquered fear becomes a guide for others still bound by it. Their words carry conviction because they are rooted in experience, not theory. They lead not by command, but by demonstration. Their story becomes evidence that change is possible, that fear can be conquered, and that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when they choose to be brave. The greatest leaders are not those who are fearless, but those who act with courage despite fear. Their legacy endures because it empowers others to lead themselves, to find strength in their own struggles, and to continue the cycle of transformation. Courage also builds a legacy within relationships and communities. When a person lives with boldness, they create space for authenticity around them. They encourage others to speak truth, to dream bigger, to act decisively. A courageous heart naturally uplifts those it touches. It refuses to be silent in the face of injustice and refuses to shrink when the world demands conformity. Such a person becomes a pillar of strength in their circle, someone others look to for guidance and reassurance. Their courage stabilizes the fearful and motivates the doubtful. In this way, their transformation becomes a shared inheritance, a ripple effect that strengthens everyone connected to them. Courage, therefore, does not die with the individual. It multiplies through every life it inspires. Over time, the legacy of the courageous becomes a torch passed from one generation to the next. Their stories, whether written or spoken, continue to ignite hearts long after their presence fades. History remembers those who chose courage over comfort because their actions altered the direction of human possibility. The courageous remind humanity that progress is built not by the fearful, but by the faithful, by those who believe in something greater than their limitations. Their legacy becomes timeless, for courage is a universal truth. It transcends culture, era, and circumstance. Every era finds its heroes, but all share the same source, the decision to rise in the face of fear. What makes this legacy eternal is not the scale of achievement, but the depth of transformation. Even the smallest acts of courage can echo for generations. A single choice to forgive, to speak, to persist, or to dream can alter countless lives unseen. The influence of courage does not fade, it expands with time. The brave sow seeds that others will harvest. They may never see the full impact of their transformation, yet it continues to shape the world long after they are gone. Such is the mystery of courage. It plants invisible roots in the collective spirit of humanity, reminding all who come after that fear was never meant to be the master. In the end, courage creates immortality not through fame, but through influence. The person who lives courageously leaves behind a story that others draw strength from when their own faith wavers. Their journey becomes proof that transformation is possible for anyone who dares to take the first step. The legacy of the brave lives on in every act of kindness, resilience, and truth inspired by their example. It is the invisible inheritance that empowers humanity to keep growing, keep rising, and keep believing that within every heart lies the same divine spark of courage waiting to awaken.